My name is Stefano Panseri, and I'm the president of the EDA, the European Demolition Association. We are here today for this dialogue about the decommissioning of a nuclear power plant. And we are glad to have as our guest Simon Carroll, the senior advisor of Vattenfall. Please, Simon, introducing yourself.
Thank you very much, Stefano. It's great to be here. I work as a strategic advisor at Vattenfall, focusing on nuclear decommissioning. So to make it simple, I look at what we want to achieve, how we're going to do it, and look at business practices and see how we can do it better.
Fantastic. So due to the fact that the topic is nuclear decommissioning, let's start from our main object, so the nuclear power plant. Can you advise us about what's the situation so far of a nuclear power plant in Europe, and what are the thoughts about the lifespan of this nuclear power plant, please?
It's a really good question, and like many of these questions, it doesn't have a simple answer. Around the world, we've got about 460 nuclear power plants, different types, different sizes, different ages. What many of them have in common is they're coming towards the end of their operating life. So they're the ones that were built earlier in the 70s and 80s are coming towards the end of their planned life. And we expect in Europe around about 200 of them will shut down over the next 20 years or so. That means as owners, we're going to have to manage their end of life. And many owners will be doing it for the first time, which means that we have to learn how to do it properly. We need to work with the supply chain to do it right and do it effectively. And obviously a key partner in that will be the demolition industry.
Yeah, sincerely speaking, 200 potential power plants to be shut down is a huge number. And of course, a topic like that will impact the demolition industry in a very significant way. So how do you see the demolition industry, the traditional one, approaching the nuclear decommissioning? Because so far, the nuclear decommissioning has been a topic for, some specific international and multinational contractor that are used to build nuclear power plant, to manage them, and also decommissioning. So how do you see the situation and this potential involvement of the traditional demolition company in this nuclear decommissioning field?
Your picture of the traditional way of doing it, I think, is a fair one. When you put some of the special features of nuclear power plants in the focus, they do pose some big challenges, some specific challenges where you need special skills, special equipment to deal with them appropriately. But honestly, that's a relatively small part of a nuclear power plant decommissioning program. Much of so you have you have a complex set of things in the center of a nuclear power plant that do require special skills, special equipment. But much of the rest of the power plant is quite common systems and equipment that you can use more or less by standard techniques and methods. What's different is, to some extent, there is radioactivity, and that is a particular feature of our facilities. And there we need workers with special training and understanding, and to be able to do that in a proper way. When I first met colleagues at EDA, I realized I had a very old-fashioned idea of demolition that wasn't really true. And I think I misunderstood what your what the business really is these days. And as someone working from the owner's side, the facility side, I needed to understand better what the demolition industry was really offering and can do well, and how that should maybe make me think about my decommissioning projects in a different way. We will continue to need those special big international firms to do certain parts of the work, but there's a huge role that could be played by a wider network of companies bringing more standard methods of demolition and helping us do the job better. And I think that's a really exciting possibility that could work in the interests of both the owners and the demolition industry as we develop a way of working together in the future.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Making a raw simplification, we can divide the activity inside the decommissioning plant in, let me say, about contaminated object and not contaminated one. So I agree that if we talk about the contaminated one, the traditional demolition sector has a lack of experience and also a lack of engineer experience, because when we talk about to making the decontamination or to remove something that is, let me call it, dirty or irradiated, the engineering process is absolutely central. And from this point of view, as a traditional demolition sector, we have to study, we have to do a lot of experience. But if we talk about, let me say, the traditional, the not contaminated object, there are a lot of, let me say, similitude with the traditional power plants, the coal one, the gas one. And there are a series of objects like, for example, the off gas or the cooling tower or the water channel, and also sometimes also the turbines and the turbines themselves. In some specific technology, they have not been contaminated by the activities. So there are a lot of objects that we are used to decommissioning in the traditional power plants, and I'm sure that we can in some way mutuate our experience and try to help the nuclear power plant owner to manage in a more efficient way that part of the decommissioning.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I think there is a role that in partnership we can do together on a large part of even the contaminated side. That means it would be maybe a different sort of relationship where we, as having expertise with the nuclear side of things, with the radiation side of things, would need to bring that expertise and make it available as the projects, to those projects, and work together to deliver those projects appropriately. But just because there's radiation or radioactivity present doesn't mean that there isn't a real role for the wider demolition industry to play in those parts as well. And when I listen to the industry, listen to what you're doing with hazardous materials, with other types of contamination, you have a lot of expertise and good practices that are easily applied in the radioactive side as well. Most of that contamination is at quite low level. So it's about using the right techniques in the right way with the right protective equipment to get the job done. And we've started to, in some of our projects, we've started to explore with a wider range of contractors, is there a role they can play and what do they need from us to be able to do that? And I think there's a lot of potential there. I mean, clearly it's easier when we're dealing with the conventional side of a power plant. As you say, the structures, the components, the equipment, the techniques you use, they're going to be common. It doesn't matter what label you have on the front door of the power plant. When it comes to the contaminated side, the bits that may have radioactivity in them because of the way that the plants work in the nuclear sector, again, a lot of the practices are going to be very similar, but there may be additional knowledge, additional expertise, particular techniques that will be necessary in those cases to protect the worker and stop contamination spreading. What we have seen is that much of what your industry does already with contaminated, hazardous materials, contamination, toxic and environmentally dangerous materials is very similar to what we do with radioactive. Some of the specific techniques are different, but in general, there's a lot of crossover. And so we see, again, perhaps a role for broadening out to include even some of the contaminated parts of the nuclear power plant, where we would have a role in maybe helping you understand the specific challenges in doing it safely, and providing our particular expertise to help you do the job better. And that's an approach that we're exploring now with our first major nuclear power plant decommissioning in Sweden.
It sounds great. I mean, you are completely right. We miss some parts of the process that are very important. For example, we miss a knowledge in the radiological control, and that is something far, far away from the culture of a traditional demolition company. But if I talk by my personal experience, finally, the PPE you use for the contaminated, dangerous substances in the traditional field are really, really close to the PPI we are going to use in nuclear decommissioning. So it's just an issue to understand better the, your, let me call it your enemy, to understand better the risk assessment around this risk. And I'm sure that from a cultural point of view, the workers employed in the demolition industry are pretty ready to approach also the nuclear one.
I'm thinking that it even, I mean, obviously I have an interest in having your people do our work. I think it goes in both directions though, because I think if I was a demolition contractor and I can say, we have experience working on sites involving hazardous waste, we have experience working on sites with hazardous environments, we've even done work on nuclear sites, that might make me more attractive for other business, be it nuclear or in other specialized sectors. It's an additional skill set. It's something that hopefully would add value. In the old days, if you like, probably nuclear would have done it its own way. We would have had really specific equipment, specific PPE, and it would have been unique to our industry. These days, as much as possible, we use the things that are in widespread use across the industry. It's better for everybody that these are standard types of equipment, standard types of procedures to use them. It makes it easier for the worker. It makes it easier for supervisors and trainers. And we do see that we're not so different in many respects. And in fact, there's a lot we can learn from other industries that are equally at home in nuclear. Again, there is some specialized knowledge, some specialized equipment, and that we have to work together on to make sure we understand it.
Of course, and we also have to work together on the approach, because, and now I'm talking my cap of European Demolition Association president, and I put my cap of CEO of a demolition company working in the nuclear field. One of the biggest cultural problem we faced at the beginning was the different scale when you approach let me say, demolition in nuclear compared to a traditional. Different scale, I mean, as demolators, we are used to talk about production of how many tons per hours. When you join the nuclear decommissioning, maybe if you're lucky, you talk about kilos per hour or per day. So here is, from our point of view, this was one of the main difficulties in order to reboot our system on a different scale, where it's not important really the production or how many kilos, but following the procedures and be sure that every single step was before designed and then proceeded and then realized. This specific approach has been very important for our company in order to learn, a method of work slightly different from a traditional demolition. And I think that we need, as an industry, the help of the owner in order to make us understand what really counts for you and what are the main driver and the main goal and how to achieve them.
Yeah, I had a similar learning curve when I started talking with the demolition industry, but in the other way. And it is quite a different culture, quite a different picture of what matters. And that obviously needs to be built into developing a relationship as well. We need to have a mutual understanding of what really matters and what will be valued. Otherwise, we will end up having misunderstandings and, in the worst case, prioritizing the wrong things in the wrong way, and that will end up in frustration. What we have started to explore is moving away from a sort of more traditional contracting arrangements where you might expect to be paid in tons and hours versus kilos and days, to talking about the principles that will guide our relationship, and focusing on what are the things that we are going to value in that contractual relationship as a project moves forward. One of the things that is a characteristic of nuclear power plant decommissioning programs is we sometimes don't know exactly what we're going to find when we're starting out on a project. And things will only become clearer as the project proceeds. And having a more collaborative sort of contract where we can focus on working together to address the challenges as they become clearer, rather than writing everything down to the last detail in a long contract and assuming that will work throughout the life of a project, has been a really important new way of thinking for us as well. It means a sort of mutual trust and mutual understanding of what we're trying to do, and making it work together. And that was a lesson learned over getting things wrong in nuclear decommissioning beforehand, where contractors often were the ones who were left picking up the pieces at the end of that, and that doesn't work.
Yes, of course, is a learning curve for the industry, and maybe we need also the help of the owner also in order to identify the right contact framework for this specific activity. I mean, from a traditional demolition point of view, we are very used to deal with closed lump sum with no possibility to claim nothing because we have usually even 99% of liability on our shoulder. But I have learned that in nuclear decommissioning, it's slightly different, and also the owner are fairly available to study the best contract framework in order to make both the parts comfortable. Do you agree on that?
I think it will vary from country to country and organization to organization. I think there's an awareness that very rigid contract models haven't worked well for us in the past. And a company like Vattenfall, we are really trying to recognize that we have a partnership with our suppliers, and we need to find something that works for both parties rather than something that just works for us. Relationships work better than one-off exchanges, and we see that we can build up a valuable relationship if we are if it's more based on mutual value rather than just one-sided value. There may be less freedom for other organizations, but for us, we see that as our supply chain brings value to the company, and it makes us and enables us to do things better. And one way to make sure that can happen effectively is to recognize that value added that the supply chain brings. That means we need to be flexible as well. It also depends on the specific work. I think there will be, in nuclear decommissioning, we have very varied work that needs to be done. Some of it may be more to the fixed price sort of contract end of the spectrum, and some of it may be more to the more flexible contracting side of the spectrum. And we can work with both, and we should be open enough to work with both. But it should be choosing the right model for the right circumstances, and that works for both partners. To me, that's common sense, but maybe common sense is not always in good supply.
Common sense is
and I've heard from the industry that some of their experiences haven't been positive.
Yeah.
And we need to acknowledge that and need to do better where that is the case.
Ali, I have experienced something, and I would like to have also your point of view on this specific topic. What we have experienced as Italian demolition company involved in nuclear is that sometimes the cultural, environmental of a client, of a contractor, are so different and so distant that the same problem can be approached by the both part with completely different results. And sometimes our experience in the traditional demolition field helps a lot. I give you a very quick example. Some years ago, I was talking with one of my clients that was asking for a very, very complicated machine with some articulation, hydraulic machine, and with a cutting tool. And in his mind, I'm sure he was thinking about some ABB 5D robot, managing something like a scissor. And after his request, I answered in a very quick way. I mean, we use this kind of, let me say, hydraulic excavator with shear every single day in our demolition. And this was an epiphany. I mean, we can solve the same problem coming from two different parts, but in the technological approach, I'm sure that demolition traditional company can bring a lot of added value to you. What do you think about that?
Completely agree. You guys work with this stuff every day. We get to do it once for every facility. And what we may have complete misunderstandings of what's possible because this is not an area that we really work with, or we're working with for the first time, for example. And that will not be uncommon in nuclear decommissioning just now. what we have found is that the best recipe to address that is to talk with each other early, build up a mutual understanding of expectations and needs, and don't tell you how to do your job, but inform you about our challenge and see if it's something you can help us with. And be, as an owner, be humble and asking the experts if this is something they can help us on in meeting a challenge. If we tell you how to do your job, it won't be ideal, that's for sure.
Yes, I agree, but this very clever and humble approach is, it's becoming rare, generally speaking, in the world. Maybe, the nuclear industry is a word apart. But
well, I can tell you that the parallel of your anecdote is we would have done exactly like your counterpart described to you. We would have developed this wonderful machine that was going to do it all on its own. It was going to be super complicated, super expensive, but it was going to solve everything. The experience in our industry is those machines are always more expensive than we thought. They don't work as well as we thought. And eventually we find a solution that was much simpler, much easier, and much more effective. And, those are the simple, effective solutions are the ones that increasingly our industry is looking to. And it may be, instead of the super duper machine, we're looking at a person with a wrench, and the wrench is adequate to do the job. So talking to the people who know how to do the work that we want done at an early stage and building it into our plans, that's the way to proceed.
This is, let me say, something really common also in the traditional demolition field. I mean, as soon as you have the chance to approach the client and to talk about, the wishes and the three main variables that we have in every single project, who are time, money, and collateral effect, like dust, debris, and everything. As soon as you can talk about this variable, as soon as you can basically assess a method statement and a solution that is already shared, and you have not to invent, the egg. You can provide to the client the best service he requires. So I hope that this attitude that you talked about before will be in the future one of the most common one, because as demolition industry, we are convinced that we are not selling commodities. I mean, we are not selling water, we are not selling energy, power, we are not selling a commodity. So every different company, every different organization is peculiar. So buying demolition service from the subject A, from the subject B or C is completely different. And unluckily, the world outside is pushing to transform the demolition itself in a commodity. But as association and as a president, we would push a lot, and we will talk and spread our idea that demolition service is not a commodity, and every single operator has its own peculiarity and its own way to help the potential client and customers.
I think that is something that as an owner we will appreciate, and the more professional relationships we can have with the demolition industry, through competent professional companies that know what they're doing and do it well, in a good way, responsibly, the potential for really good relationships in the future is very high.
Fantastic. Simon, before to thank you for your kind availability, I would like to remember that this dialogue will be inside the EDA Demolition Yearbook 2023. So it will be possible to find the main talk of this video inside the yearbook. And I would like to take the opportunity to warmly invite you at the next EDA Demolition Convention that will be held the 14th and 15th of June 2024 in Belgrade in Serbia. And we will be honored to have you there in order to continue our dialogue and in order to try to spread benefit for both for the industry and the demolition industry and also for the nuclear power plant owner. Thank you very much for your time, for your kind availability, and for the very interesting information you shared with us.
Thank you very much, Stefano, both for the dialogue today and for the invitation. And I look forward very much to seeing you in Belgrade.
Can't wait. Goodbye.
Goodbye.